My brother destroyed my life, so I turned her own lies into her worst nightmare. My brother looked straight at me, his expression calm, almost bored, as he tore my passport cleanly in half. The sound of ripping paper felt louder than the rain pounding against the windows of the house. He dropped both pieces into the toilet, pressed the handle, and watched as my name, my visa stamps, my future disappeared into the swirling water. "Now you stay," he said quietly. "And you watch my kid." I turned toward the doorway, my heart hammering, waiting for someone to stop him. Waiting for outrage. For reason. For intervention. My mother and father stood side by side in the hall. They laughed. Not nervously. Not awkwardly. It was real laughter, light, dismissive, relieved. In that moment, something inside me settled into place with terrifying clarity. This was no longer a family home. It was containment. And I was the one being contained. I stood there as the toilet finished flushing, my hands numb, my chest hollow. $6,000. 2 years of work. My exit. Gone in less than 10 seconds. Before I explain what I later found hidden in my mother's office, the thing that changed the balance of power completely, let me ask you this: what is the one thing someone close to you did that you will never forgive? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked back to my room and shut the door carefully, then shoved a chair under the handle. Only then did my hands start to shake. My name is Marin Hale. I'm 24 years old. And for most of my adult life, I have been my family's emergency fund. I opened my suitcase and began packing with mechanical precision. Shirts. Jeans. Charger. Laptop. I reached for the folder on my desk and hesitated for a second before dropping it into the bag. Inside were invoices, every freelance design job I had taken over the past 2 years. Logos, branding packages, late-night revisions sent at 3 in the morning. Proof that nothing I had came easily. I glanced at the spreadsheet taped to the wall. $6,487. That was the travel fund. Italy. A single month that was supposed to be mine. Not a gift. Not an inheritance. Money earned line by line while skipping meals and weekends. But the real number followed immediately after. $14,900. That was what I had loaned my brother over the years. Rent emergencies. Car trouble that never seemed to resolve. Cash transfers that turned into silence the moment the money cleared. And then there was last week. He had cornered me in the kitchen with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He hadn't asked me to babysit. He hadn't even mentioned his child. He asked for $6,000. He said he deserved it. That becoming a parent had ruined his body, his confidence, his life. He called it recovery. When I told him that money was already promised, that it was for me, his face hardened. That was when I finally understood the arithmetic of entitlement. To him, my savings were not mine. They were unused resources. And my refusal wasn't just a no, it was an offense. If he couldn't have the money, I couldn't be allowed the escape. Destroying my passport wasn't about childcare. It was about control. I closed the suitcase. They thought I was upset about a trip. They didn't realize the account was closed. I slung the bag over my shoulder and walked downstairs slowly. Running invites pursuit. Walking signals finality. The hardwood echoed beneath my boots. I felt their eyes on my back but didn't turn around. The front door was 10 steps away. My fingers were inches from the handle when a hand slammed against the doorframe beside my head. My father. He didn't look like the man who taught me to ride a bike. He looked like an obstacle. He reached up and slid the deadbolt shut. The sound was absolute. "You're not leaving," he said. "You're going to apologize." I stared at him. "He destroyed my documents." "He's overwhelmed," my mother said sharply, stepping closer. "Just send the money. Then this can stop." That was it. The truth, clean and exposed. They didn't want peace. They wanted payment. This wasn't discipline. It was detention until transfer. I looked at their faces and finally saw them clearly, not victims of my brother's behavior, but collaborators. Sacrificing me was easier than confronting him. "You're extorting me," I said quietly. "We're correcting you," my father snapped. "Now hand over the phone." I knew then that I couldn't force my way out. But I also knew the house better than they remembered. "Fine," I said, lowering my bag. "I need the bathroom first." They relaxed, just enough. I turned and ran. Straight toward the one room my mother believed was untouchable. Her office. And that's where everything began to change. I reached my mother's office just as footsteps thundered behind me. The door was solid oak, heavier than it looked. I slammed it shut, twisted the lock, then slid the floor bolt into place. A second later, my father's shoulder hit the wood with a dull, violent thud. The frame shuddered but held. "Open this door, Marin," he shouted, pounding again. "You're making this worse." I didn't answer. I backed away slowly and lowered myself into the leather chair behind the desk. My pulse was loud in my ears, but something else was happening beneath the fear. A kind of focus. The kind that only comes when panic burns itself out and leaves clarity behind. This room was supposed to be sacred. My mother's sanctuary. No one entered without permission. No one touched her files. I woke the computer. The screen glowed softly, asking for a password. I typed it in without hesitation. Her birth year. My brother's initials. Access granted. Outside, the pounding continued. My father yelling. My brother shouting that I was losing it. My mother crying, the theatrical kind, meant for an audience. I ignored them. I navigated straight to the cloud drive. I wasn't looking for a weapon. I was looking for the truth I already suspected was there. My mother believed in documentation. She saved everything. Bills. Statements. Letters. Scans. She believed paper was power. The first folder I opened was labeled House. Mortgage history. Refinancing paperwork. Tax correspondence. And then something that made my stomach tighten. A deed. I opened it. My name was on it. Not as an occupant. Not as a witness. As a partial owner. Dated 4 years earlier. I stared at the screen, confused. That didn't make sense. I would have remembered signing something like this. Then I did remember. My mother had called me into this office late one night, exhausted, stressed, saying there was a formality required to fix a banking issue. She said her credit was tangled and needed a temporary solution. She told me it meant nothing. That it was just to satisfy the bank. I had trusted her. She hadn't lied, not entirely. She had put me on the title to protect the house from her own financial mess. And she had forgotten. I downloaded the file. Outside, the noise shifted. The pounding stopped. "Marin," my mother called through the door, her voice suddenly soft. "Please. We just want to help you." I almost laughed. I moved to the next folder. Finances. Subfolders opened like a confession. And there it was. A folder labeled with my brother's first initial. Inside were credit card statements. 1, 2, 5, 12. Balances climbing into the tens of thousands. But what stopped me cold was the name on the accounts. They weren't in my brother's name. They were in his partner's. Card after card. Maxed out. Late payments narrowly avoided. And the mailing address? A P.O. box. Registered to my mother. I felt sick. This wasn't irresponsibility. This wasn't denial. This was fraud. My parents weren't just enabling him. They were actively covering for him. Hiding statements. Making minimum payments. Letting someone else's credit burn so their son wouldn't have to feel discomfort. I copied everything. Statements. Account numbers. Payment histories. Then I opened the security system. The camera feed loaded instantly. There it was. My brother ripping the passport. My father sliding the deadbolt. My mother standing between me and the door, demanding the transfer. I exported every clip. Saved them locally. Uploaded backups. Then I heard it. Silence. Too much silence. "Marin," my brother's voice drifted down the hall. "We can talk. You don't need to do this." I stood. Unlocked nothing. But I moved closer to the door, listening. Then the screaming started. High. Raw. Terrifying. "Help. Please." I froze. Footsteps ran. The front door opened. Sirens. My heart dropped into my stomach. They had called the police. I unlocked the office door just as red and blue lights washed through the hallway. And that's when I saw him. My brother stood in the corridor, face streaked with blood. Scratches ran down his cheek, deep and jagged. His shirt was torn. His eyes were wild. I knew immediately. He had done it to himself. He collapsed just as the officers entered. "She attacked me," he screamed, pointing past them. "She went crazy." My mother dropped to her knees beside him, sobbing. My father stood behind them, shaking his head slowly, tragically. "She's unstable," my mother said through tears. "We were trying to keep her safe." The officer turned toward me. "Ma'am, show me your hands." Cold metal clicked around my wrists. I didn't resist. Because I knew something they didn't. And the truth was already recording. The moment I realized the depth of Brianna's cruelty hit me like a frozen wave. My name is Haley. I was 24, and for years, I had quietly funded the family's illusions, the golden child's whims, the endless emergencies that somehow always aligned with her desires. But tonight, standing in the hallway with the remnants of my passport floating in the toilet, I finally understood that this wasn't just about money. It was about control, humiliation, and keeping me small. Brianna smirked, her eyes gleaming like polished obsidian as the water swirled my $6,000 down the drain. "Now you have to stay and watch Mason," she said, her voice a venomous whisper. My parents laughed behind her, standing in the doorway like spectators at a cruel theater. I felt every inch of my future, the Italy trip, the freedom, the independence, disintegrate into a swirl of porcelain and humiliation. I slammed my bedroom door, shoving a chair under the handle, trying to steady my shaking hands. I stuffed my suitcase with clothes, documents, and my meticulously organized invoices, proof of every late-night freelance design gig I had done, every sacrifice I'd made to build the small nest egg that Brianna had just obliterated. That money wasn't charity. It was my labor, my late nights, my skipped meals, my choices to prioritize my dreams over immediate comfort. Then it hit me, the real tally wasn't $6,500. It was $15,000. The sum of all the loans I had given Brianna over the years, emergency car repairs, rent, appliances, even tuition. And now, she expected me to accept her demands as entitlement, to continue subsidizing her vanity and selfishness. My refusal wasn't simply defiance. In her ledger, it was theft. My refusal upset the balance of her world. If I couldn't be her ATM, I had to be diminished, humiliated, and kept in place. I grabbed my bag and didn't run, didn't scream. Running would make me pray. I walked through the hallway, boots striking the hardwood with deliberate rhythm, each step a statement of resolve. Brianna's smirk faltered as I approached the front door. But before my fingers could touch the brass handle, a hand slammed against the wood just inches from my face. My father, Richard, stood there, massive and immovable, his bulk blocking the exit. He didn't speak at first. His eyes, usually warm and instructive, were now cold and commanding. "You aren't walking out," he said, his voice low and iron hard. "You're going back inside and apologizing to your sister." I looked at him in disbelief. She stole my money, destroyed my passport, and manipulated the situation, and he wanted me to apologize? My voice was steady despite the adrenaline. "She's not a victim. She's a predator. And you're enabling her." My mother, Patricia, stepped up beside him, her expression one of forced calm. "Transfer the money to Brianna. That's all it takes," she said. Her tone carried the weight of centuries of misplaced loyalty. "If you do that, we can be a family again." I realized in that instant the ugly truth: this wasn't reconciliation. It was extortion. They weren't asking for peace, they were asking for compliance. I was a human shield, a financial resource, and a scapegoat all rolled into one. For years, I thought my mother feared conflict. Now I knew she actively calculated it, preserving the comfort of the golden child at the expense of my autonomy. I feigned submission. "Fine. I need to use the bathroom first," I whispered, dropping my bag and stepping back. My parents relaxed, smug satisfaction softening their features. But I didn't head to the bathroom. I ran straight for my father's office, the room he had always thought was his sanctuary from the chaos of the house. I threw the door open, slammed it shut behind me, and twisted the deadbolt. His shoulder collided with the wood seconds later, but the secondary latch held. I sat at his massive desk, breathing steadily now, clarity replacing fear. I wasn't a child anymore. I was the auditor. I opened his computer, the familiar screen asking for a password. My fingers typed automatically, the combination he never changed, my mother's birthday plus his old football jersey number. Access granted. While my parents screamed outside, I navigated the family cloud server, pulling up security footage, financial records, and all the correspondence they had tried to hide. I found the moment Brianna destroyed my passport, the calculated way she had flaunted my savings, and the parents who stood by, enabling every move. Extortion, false imprisonment, and destruction of property, each frame and document building a case that would finally put me in control. I gathered credit card statements, proof of identity theft, and email evidence of every manipulated transaction. The numbers were staggering, over $45,000 in hidden debt accrued under false pretenses, payments funneled through my parents' accounts to cover her mistakes. They weren't just shielding her, they were accomplices, willing to destroy Brandon's financial life to preserve her fantasy. Outside, my mother's voice trembled, begging, "Please, Haley. Don't do anything you can't take back." I whispered to the empty office, "I'm not acting. I'm forwarding the records." I attached every statement, every clip, every shred of proof and emailed it to Brandon. Then I called 911. My calm, precise actions ensured that the law would intervene before Brianna could manipulate another lie. The doors that had once trapped me now contained the evidence of their crimes. In one careful sweep, I had turned the predator into the prosecuted, the enablers into exposed participants, and myself from victim to victor. The red and blue lights washed over the study, painting the walls in streaks of chaos. I could hear my parents shouting behind the door, their voices tense and panicked. "Haley." My mother's voice cracked, pleading. "Richard." My father's deep, commanding tone carried frustration and disbelief. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I had become something they hadn't accounted for, precise, calculated, untouchable. I opened the first folder labeled B and started scrolling. Hidden credit cards, secret P.O. boxes, falsified statements. Every extravagant purchase Brianna had made, designer handbags, spa retreats, luxury hotel suites, was funded using stolen money from Brandon, her husband, and funneled through my parents' accounts. They weren't naive. They were complicit. Their complicity had allowed Brianna's entitlement to metastasize into full-blown fraud. I could feel the weight of it all, the gravity of truth pressing down on me, and a quiet satisfaction began to rise. I opened the security footage from 20 minutes earlier. There it was, Brianna smirking, ripping my passport in half, water swirling down the toilet, and my parents standing like spectators in a nightmare they had orchestrated. Their laughter, their smug relief, the belief that they could control the narrative, they had all been documented. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was armed. My fingers moved quickly, downloading the clips, attaching PDFs, compiling the entire dossier. Brandon's email was already typed in the recipient line, subject bolded, "The debts you didn't know existed." I paused only for a moment, taking a deep breath. This was not revenge, this was justice. The scales of imbalance that had governed my family's life for years were about to tip. The pounding at the door grew frantic. "Haley. Open this door." Richard shouted, his voice cracking under stress. My mother joined him, shrill and desperate, "Please, you don't understand. You're going too far." Their desperation filled the hallway, but I didn't respond. I had learned long ago that panic was a weapon only they wielded. Calm, methodical actions were mine. I sent the dossier. Hit send. The weight lifted slightly, a small exhale of freedom in the midst of chaos. Then I dialed 911, giving the dispatcher my location, explaining the situation with precision, that I was being held against my will, that Brianna had destroyed property, that my parents were enabling and obstructing my freedom. Every word was measured, designed to ensure immediate intervention. And then, the door shuddered. Brianna was screaming. Her voice was raw, terrified, and wild, but there was a falseness to it I recognized immediately. The seconds felt like hours as I listened to the chaos she created. I stayed seated at my father's massive desk, the leather warm beneath my fingers, the desktop humming under my hands. This room, once a sanctuary of my father's secrets, had become a fortress of justice. The first officer arrived, knocking with authority, demanding compliance. I unlocked the deadbolt. The door swung open, not for me, but for the first responders who had no preconceptions, no loyalties. And then I saw her. Brianna, the golden child, the tyrant, standing in the hallway with scratches marking her face, blouse torn, hair tangled, a mess of her own creation. "Help me," she screamed, collapsing theatrically as the officers moved in. I stood back, watching. This was the moment where truth revealed itself. Brianna had no allies in law enforcement, no secret loopholes, no excuses left. Every lie she had told, every manipulation she had attempted, was now exposed. Brandon arrived soon after, evidence in hand, ready to confront the fraud and reclaim what was rightfully his. My parents, caught between panic and disbelief, realized too late that their protection of Brianna had been their undoing. The officers removed the handcuffs that had momentarily bound me, an ironic twist, and focused on Brianna, who continued to scream, claiming victimhood. Her cries met with professional scrutiny. Statements were taken, evidence catalogued, and the truth became undeniable. Brianna's actions were not just malicious, they were criminal. Identity theft, extortion, false imprisonment, destruction of property, all meticulously documented by the very person she had tried to suppress. For the first time in years, I felt the sweet, chilling clarity of control. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the orchestrator of justice, the unseen force that had exposed the family's fractures and the golden child's corruption. My parents had built their lives around illusions of perfection, but the digital evidence, the cold hard facts, rendered all their narratives meaningless. As the officers escorted Brianna away, her smirk vanished. The smug confidence that had tormented me for years was replaced with panic, disbelief, and vulnerability. Brandon, calm but resolute, reclaimed his rightful possessions, setting the financial stage for accountability. My parents were left standing, stunned and powerless, witnessing the collapse of the empire they had carefully curated for the wrong heir. I finally allowed myself to breathe. Every system, every camera, every digital footprint I had set up as a child, as the quiet one, as the responsible one, had become my armor. The moment of tension, of terror, of helplessness, had shifted into precision, retribution, and clarity. Haley, the quiet one, had become Haley, the executor of justice, the curator of truth, the one who finally ensured that deceit and entitlement met consequences. The chaos of the hallway faded as I sat back in the leather chair, the sound of sirens still faintly echoing outside. My heart no longer raced with fear, but with something far colder, the satisfaction of inevitability. Every file I had compiled, every clip I had secured, every email I had sent, had changed the landscape of my life and my family's lives permanently. Haley, the quiet one, had finally found her voice, and it was deafening. Brandon took control immediately. He approached me, calm but intense, and whispered, "You've got everything documented. Nothing they can say will undo this." His presence was grounding. For years, I had carried the weight of others' selfishness on my shoulders. Now, with him validating the evidence, the truth became unstoppable. My parents had retreated into the far corner of the study, their faces pale, mouths agape, their hands trembling. Beatrice, my mother, whispered, "Haley, we were just trying to protect her." The excuse sounded hollow even to her ears. Richard, my father, shook his head, a mixture of shame and fear evident in his eyes. I realized then that the fear they had instilled in me for years had reversed. The predators had become prey. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and walked slowly toward the center of the room. "Protecting her?" I said, my voice calm, almost clinical. "You mean enabling criminal behavior and then trying to frame me when I refused to play along?" Their silence confirmed what I already knew. They had no defense, no moral ground. I looked at Brandon, who nodded slightly. Together, we reviewed the evidence one more time. Every credit card statement, every falsified invoice, every digital trace of Brianna's manipulation was catalogued. She had been meticulous, but I had been more meticulous. For years, I had silently observed, documented, and strategized. Now, the strategy was complete. Then the phone rang. My parents jumped at the sound, and I allowed myself a small, private smile. It was Mr. Daly, our family attorney. "Haley," his voice was measured, "the evidence is more than sufficient. Brianna will face criminal charges, and your parents' complicity is documented. If you want, we can begin the process to secure your financial independence and reclaim everything they tried to withhold." I nodded. "Do it." That single word carried the weight of years of restraint, of hidden frustration, of quiet observation. I wasn't asking for permission. I was issuing orders. The legal machinery would now formalize the justice I had already orchestrated. Over the next few hours, the atmosphere in the old Maple residence shifted. Police took statements, Brandon met with his legal team, and Brianna was led into custody, screaming and clawing at anyone who tried to restrain her. My parents watched helplessly, unable to intervene, unable to comfort, unable to manipulate. For the first time, they were powerless in the narrative of our family. I stood in the study and looked around. Every book, every piece of antique furniture, every framed photograph of the life they had curated for appearances now seemed almost comical. Their empire had been built on lies, but I had built my leverage on truth. And truth, as I had learned, always wins. Brandon turned to me. "You want to take control of the estate now?" he asked. It wasn't a question of arrogance, it was a practical inquiry. I had every legal right to claim my inheritance. Every document, every clause, every meticulous notation of our father's intentions was aligned. "Yes," I replied. Not for revenge, not for vanity, but because justice demanded it. The estate, the financial resources, and the legacy my father intended for the rightful heir would now be under my stewardship. And stewardship meant more than money. It meant fairness, integrity, and accountability, values my parents and sister had long ignored. That night, as I locked the study door behind me, I realized the enormity of what had happened. The family that had held me captive, emotionally and financially, for decades had finally lost their control. The golden child, the enabler parents, the orchestrators of manipulation, they were exposed. And I, the quiet one, had become the executor of justice, the arbiter of truth. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window. Outside, the world continued, oblivious to the drama inside Old Maple. But inside, I had finally taken the reins. My future, my finances, and my freedom were secure. The power of documentation, of meticulous planning, and of restraint had turned the tables. For the first time, I felt truly untouchable. I allowed myself a small, private smile. Brianna's empire of manipulation was crumbling. My parents' influence was neutralized. And me? I was free to step out of the shadow of family toxicity and into a life defined by my own terms, my own rules, and my own morality. That night, as I prepared for the quietest sleep I had known in years, I knew one thing: justice, when calculated and executed with precision, is far more satisfying than revenge. The golden child would learn, the enablers would learn, and I would live, finally, unburdened and unafraid. The morning sun cut through the blinds, casting golden stripes across the study floor. For the first time in years, the air in Old Maple House felt like mine. I poured a cup of coffee and sat back at the desk, surveying the empire I had inherited, not just the money, not just the estate, but the power to decide the fate of those who had once held me hostage. The feeling was intoxicating, but it was tempered by clarity. Justice, not revenge, had guided my hand. Brandon appeared at the doorway, holding Mason, his expression a mixture of relief and awe. "It's done," he said softly. "She's in custody, the charges are filed, and your parents, well, they're in shock, but safe. No one can undo this." I nodded. Words felt unnecessary. The quiet satisfaction of control was enough. I checked the phone once more. Every email, every uploaded clip, every document sent to secure servers had created an unbreakable chain of truth. Brianna couldn't spin, manipulate, or threaten anyone ever again. She had tried to weaponize my life, to erase my dreams and my freedom, but I had turned her own tactics against her. Later that day, my parents, Beatrice and Richard, arrived at the house. Their demeanor was cautious, fearful, and a little humbled. For decades, they had wielded their comfort as a shield against accountability, but today the shield was gone. "Haley," my mother whispered, her voice trembling, we were wrong. We didn't see it. We didn't protect you." I studied her carefully. Years of enabling, of complicity, of passive cruelty had not been erased in a moment. But I had something else now: choice. I could respond with anger, I could cast them out immediately, but I didn't. I allowed myself a small, measured calm. "You didn't protect me," I said. "But now you can learn what it means to be accountable. You can't erase the past, but you can decide how you act in the present." Richard swallowed hard. We understand. We'll comply with whatever you decide." And I did something unexpected: I offered them a lifeline, within limits. A modest allowance, access to a small apartment, and clear boundaries. I would not be manipulated again, but I was not cruel. Justice and mercy could coexist. Brandon left Mason with me for a moment. I held him, feeling a profound sense of purpose. Protecting him, securing his future, and dismantling the manipulative forces in his life, that was part of the freedom I had claimed for myself. Not vengeance, but restoration. I had rebuilt a family, not through submission, but through truth and courage. In the following weeks, the legal system processed everything with efficiency. Brianna pled guilty to the charges of false reporting, destruction of property, and financial fraud. Probation, restitution, and therapy were mandated. The court recognized my parents' complicity but treated them with leniency contingent on full compliance and restitution for the financial harm caused. The balance of justice had been struck. Meanwhile, I took control of the estate fully. Investments were consolidated, the house maintained, and charitable initiatives established. The first project, a foundation to support victims of financial abuse and family exploitation, ensuring that no one else would face what I had endured. Every step I took was deliberate, calculated, and imbued with the knowledge that power, once held, must be used responsibly. One evening, I sat on the veranda with a journal in hand. The estate stretched out in front of me, perfectly silent, save for the distant rustle of leaves. I wrote, "Freedom isn't just escape. Freedom is the ability to act without fear, to correct the wrongs, and to live with integrity. I am finally free." I put down the pen, taking in the serenity of the moment. For the first time, the silence around me was not oppressive. It was restorative. I didn't need to prove anything to my parents, to Brianna, or to the world. I had claimed my life, my autonomy, and my legacy. Every stolen dollar, every insult, every manipulation had been accounted for, and the scales had been balanced. Months later, as I wandered the Italian streets I had dreamed of visiting for years, my phone buzzed. Notifications, emails, and messages were all congratulations from friends, colleagues, and strangers who had witnessed my story unfold online. I smiled, savoring the moment. I had survived betrayal, greed, and family treachery, and emerged not broken, but stronger, wiser, and infinitely more free. I sent one last message to my family group chat, a simple image of the Colosseum with the caption, "Worth the wait." Then I blocked the group. Permanently. I was Haley. I was free. I was untouchable. And for the first time in my life, I knew the meaning of real justice, the quiet, unstoppable triumph of truth, courage, and moral authority. The golden child, the enablers, the manipulators, they had all fallen. And I was finally, fully, breathing. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.